Have you ever wondered what happens when the divine tries to reach us through a big boy restaurant? Today, we're exploring some of the most unexpected ways spiritual messages show up in our lives.
That's such an intriguing way to look at it. I recently came across this fascinating story about divine intervention that starts with a young boy named Samuel in an ancient temple.
Tell me more about Samuel's experience. What makes his story so compelling thousands of years later?
Well, picture this: a 7-year-old boy sleeping alone in this vast temple next to the sacred Ark of the Covenant, when suddenly he hears someone calling his name in the darkness.
You know, what's particularly fascinating about that, even the elderly priest Eli, who'd spent his entire life in religious service, didn't immediately recognize what was happening. It really shows how we can miss even the most obvious spiritual signals.
That's exactly right, and it connects perfectly to this modern story about Bob Lesnow at that big boy restaurant I mentioned.
Oh, right. What happened with Bob? How does his experience mirror something from thousands of years ago?
So he's just having lunch at the counter when this scholarly looking stranger taps his shoulder and says, "I want to see you in church." When Bob tries to deflect, saying he doesn't live in town, the man simply says, "I didn't say what church," and then vanishes completely.
That's wild. You know what makes these stories so compelling? Whether it's Samuel in the temple or Bob at the restaurant, they both face this crucial moment of decision: respond to the call or turn away from it.
Hmm. And speaking of life-changing moments, there's this powerful story about Peggy Terry during the civil rights movement that really illustrates this idea of divine intervention through unexpected channels.
Tell me more about Peggy's transformation. What exactly triggered her spiritual awakening?
Well, she witnessed Martin Luther King Jr. being beaten outside the Montgomery jail, and what struck her most was his response. No retaliation, no cursing, just dignified silence. She said it turned her world upside down.
That's such a powerful image, watching someone maintain their principles even in the face of brutal opposition. How did this experience change her life going forward?
By that very night, she had joined the protests herself and even been arrested. She later said, "I believe that you act on your beliefs," and she literally lived that principle from that moment forward.
You know what I find particularly fascinating about all these stories? They seem to suggest that these moments of divine intervention often require us to give up some level of control, whether it's our social standing, our comfort zone, or even our preconceived notions.
That reminds me of Ruth Andrews' story. She was facing major life changes and financial challenges when she encountered this simple but powerful message: "Be still and know that I am God."
And how did that work out for Ruth? Sometimes these spiritual messages don't necessarily lead to the outcomes we expect, right?
Exactly. She still had to move in with a relative instead of keeping her apartment, but she gained something perhaps more valuable. She learned, as she put it, to be calmer in the storm.
It seems like these moments of divine intervention often come when we're least expecting them, whether we're sleeping in a temple, eating lunch at a restaurant, or simply going about our daily lives. Maybe that's part of what makes them so powerful.
And they often require us to be willing to change everything about our lives, just like Samuel when he finally said, "Speak, for your servant is listening."
Perhaps that's why these stories continue to resonate across time and cultures. They speak to this universal experience of being called to something bigger than ourselves, even when that call comes in ways we might not expect or initially welcome.
And they remind us that sometimes the most profound messages come when we're simply willing to listen.
You know what I'm taking away from all this? Maybe we need to spend less time trying to control every aspect of our lives and more time being open to those unexpected calls in the night. whatever form they might take.